Welcome to the second part of Refuting Logicked. In this part, we'll discuss about the arguments of Logicked against the existence of Allah.
You prove God's existence by saying for every design, there must be a designer. For every painting, there must be a painter. For every car, there must have been a manufacturer. Likewise, for the creations of Allah on earth, there has to be a creator.
You know what? I actually agree with you completely. For the creations of Allah, there has to be a creator, because they're creations. By definition, they have to have a creator. So now all you have to do is prove that Allah exists and that He created anything, and whatever you manage to prove was created by Him, I will agree, has to have a creator. Unfortunately, the number of items currently confirmed as having been created by Allah is 0. The best we tend to get when we ask someone for evidence that some item was actually created by Allah is that someone will point at something and say, well, that seems pretty complicated, so if Allah didn't do it, then I can't think of a good reason why it's there, and that would suck, which I'm afraid is just not that compelling.
Another argument is that we are all possible beings. We had no control into coming into this world. There has to be a necessary existence who began all of this.
It sounds to me like you're talking about Thomas Aquinas' third way to prove the existence of God. In which case, I have no idea why a Muslim feels the need to snatch Christian apologetics, but okay, it sounds fun. Let's pick that apart then. Aquinas says,
"The third way is taken from possibility and necessity, and runs thus. We find in nature things that are possible to be and not to be, since they are found to be generated and to corrupt, and consequently, they are possible to be and not to be."
Okay, so right off the bat, there's a bit of a problem. In nature, we find things that are found to be generated and to corrupt, or in other words, to come into existence and to pass out of it again. So what does he mean by that? The arrangement of matter and energy, which we call an animal, is in a sense created and destroyed. But the matter and energy themselves that comprise it are not. The total energy of the universe is conserved over time, at least until we get back to the Big Bang, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so we have no reason to believe that energy can be created or destroyed, at least within the context of the universe. And before anyone mentions virtual particles, I mean in a way that alters the total energy of the universe on average. Now, we can modernize the concept of the destruction of things, at least, and we could think about it more that if we consider the universe to stretch infinitely into the past with no Big Bang, then by now the universe would have reached heat death, and nothing we see around us would be possible. But in that hypothetical, the energy still exists along the entire timeline. The energy would not have been destroyed, it would just be in a different state where nothing much happens.
But it is impossible for these always to exist, for that which is possible not to be at some time is not.
The point of this statement is that if it's possible for something not to exist, then given infinite time in the past, it will at some time not have existed, since in an infinite amount of time, all possible things will happen. And that's true. But, for it to be impossible for energy to always exist, it would have to first be demonstrated that energy actually can be created or destroyed, which has not been done.
Therefore, if everything is possible not to be, then at one time there could have been nothing in existence.
Yeah, and I will even harden the claim for Aquinas. He uses the word could, and I'll replace it with will. If the universe stretches into the past infinitely, and if it's possible for all things not to exist at some point, then it is possible for all things to lack existence at the same time, even if there are infinite things along the timeline. And since in infinite time all possible things will happen, there must be some time when nothing existed. But again, this is all a hypothetical scenario. It's not based in reality.
Now I'll try to describe this briefly. What Thomas Aquinas meant here was that the universe shows the phenomenon of destruction. If the past of the universe that includes this phenomenon of destruction goes towards an eternity, then the universe would suffer from a heat death, and there would be no universe today.
Now if this were true, even now there would be nothing in existence, because that which does not exist only begins to exist by something already existing.
This is still based on the assumption that energy in the universe are all impermanent, of course, because Aquinas wasn't thinking in terms of the permanence or impermanence of matter or energy, but the impermanence of collections of matter and energy that we humans put labels on. And in addition, this claim was based on nothing more than Aquinas' intuition. He's whatever you would call the equivalent of a hard atheist, except about the claim that something could come into existence on its own. known, even before the existence of the universe and all physical laws and features that implies, including, potentially, the rules of cause and effect. He's stuck thinking within the rules under which he's lived for his entire life.
Now this is where logic stumbles a bit. Thomas Aquinas was simply trying to say that you cannot get something from nothing. What Logicked was trying to say here is that you cannot apply this statement before the existence of universe, because this statement is applicable only after the existence of universe. I think this is silly to some extent, because we derive all the logic from this universe and our experience in this universe, don't we?
He's stuck thinking within the rules under which he's lived for his entire life. Now, in ordinary conversation, I wouldn't fault the guy for that too much, but in a logical argument for something's existence, you have to be more careful and precise than that. Just imagine the reaction if I used "there is no God" as a premise in a serious logical argument for the existence of something else. It wouldn't go over very well.
Yes, just like the existence of Allah doesn't go very well for atheists, agnosticists, and also skeptics like Logicked. So it goes both ways. Now he blamed Thomas Aquinas for being stuck within the laws of the universe. Well, aren't all of us confined to the laws and logic within the universe? And if you're saying that this is wrong, well, then it's time to change the name of your channel, because you have just become either a rejecter or a skeptic of logic yourself.
Therefore, if at one time nothing was in existence, it would have been impossible for anything to have begun to exist, and thus even now nothing would be in existence, which is absurd.
If we grant all of Aquinas' myriad assumptions, this is correct. But his assumptions, or I should say his assertions, are based on no evidence except for the limited 13th century intuition of Thomas Aquinas. The assumption that time extends infinitely into the past is unsupported. The assumption that there ever was nothing in existence is unsupported. The assumption that even outside of the context of the rules of our universe, outside of time itself, the time-based rules of cause and effect apply is unsupported. And I don't just mean they were unsupported by Aquinas, who I wouldn't expect to support them. I mean they're still unsupported. The modern scientific understanding simply does not hold those as facts.
Yes, the key point he touched here was the last one, which was that cause and effect before the existence of universe is unsupported. And then he said it's still unsupported by modern science. So the question is, if it's not supported by science, wouldn't it stay an assumption and not a fact? Well, the theist would say no, because science or physics only operates within the space-time limits. So it can only derive facts within this domain. However, logic operates in all domains, and logic is also used to derive facts. So logic simply uses premises. The premises for existence of Allah are simple. If universe began to exist, premise 1, the universe must have a cause that was also existing, premise 2.
Therefore, not all beings are merely possible, but there must exist something the existence of which is necessary.
Necessary as in, it's impossible that it doesn't exist, and so in infinite time, in which all possible things will happen, it would never cease to exist. But every necessary thing, blah 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 blah, the necessary thing is the first thing and everyone calls that God. Not the universe, not whatever might have been there before the Big Bang if that's not God, and not 2 things, or 3 things, or 4 things. Nope, gotta be God for some reason. Man, Aquinas was unimaginative. What a line of shit this whole argument is.
So why does the cause has to be an eternal God or Allah? He first said, why cannot it be a universe? I'm guessing he means, why cannot there be an eternal universe that can be the cause of this universe? The answer is because then you will fall into the fallacy of equivocation, which means it's the same eternal entity, but you are trying to change its name, which cannot be the case. Because the original name of this eternal entity has always been known by the theists for a very long time, which is God or Allah. As for why it cannot be something before the Big Bang, well, Allah was existing before the Big Bang, but he probably means another finite entity that existed before the Big Bang. Well, then you will fall into the problem of infinite regress, and this regress is only broken by an eternal entity, which is Allah. And that's exactly what Thomas Aquinas said here. Now, it is impossible to go on to infinity in necessary things, which have their necessity caused by another, as has already been proved in regards to efficient causes. Therefore, we cannot but postulate the existence of some being having of itself its own necessity, and not receiving it from another, but rather causing in others their necessity. This all men speak of as God or Allah. Now, lastly, for why it cannot be two things or three things that can be a cause of this universe. Answer is simple. The finite numbers do not exist in the eternal realm. If you add 1 or 2 to infinity, nothing changes. It remains infinity. So this is why an eternal cause or Allah is the best explanation from all perspectives. And this is exactly the first pillar of Islam, which is La ilaha illallah.